So now for more on the latest nuclear talks between the United States and Iran. We're joined today by Professor Robert Lawrence, Professor of English and Turkic Studies at Dongduk Women's University. Professor Lawrence, thanks for joining us today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So this was the two sides' third round of indirect talks, right? What do you make of the latest meeting?
Well, it's tough to say. Reports indicate that Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner weren't satisfied with the first session, and there hasn't been much of a report about the second session as of yet from the American side. In the Iranian press, they're indicating that significant progress was made, quoting the Omani foreign minister, but they're also demonstrating that they were very firm on their demands. So I think what will be crucial now is if President Trump believes that the Iranians are serious about making a deal, or if he thinks that they're stringing him along again. That was what he thought during the June negotiations last year, and we saw how that worked out. So I think it really comes down to how he perceives the talks to have gone.
Right, and just before the talks ended, the Iranian state television also said the country was determined to continue enriching uranium, indicating it was not prepared to meet the U.S. demands. So do you think it's realistic for the two sides to actually reach a deal despite their fundamental differences, and how likely is the risk of war?
Yeah. Both sides have been sending a lot of mixed signals in these negotiations the whole time. There are a number of fundamental differences that these sides have. They're both publicly saying that they won't budge on these issues like zero enrichment or including regional behavior or missile capabilities. And this is why so many people believe that conflict is inevitable. So, I think President Trump wants to avoid making any deal that's similar to the JCPOA that he so heavily criticized and eventually exited. One of his biggest criticisms of the JCPOA was that the sanctions relief money was then spent on regional proxies and missiles. So he sees these issues as interconnected, I think. Iran, inversely, probably thinks that its missile capabilities are its best deterrent against an Israeli attack. So it's an existential priority for them. And I think they rightly believe that. So nothing's really inevitable, but it's hard to see how a clear path towards de-escalation or some sort of off-ramp can exist when both sides are so publicly at odds with each other's core demands.
Right, and on missiles, Iranian officials, have dismissed President Trump's claims that Iran is developing missiles capable of reaching the United States. So what's known about the current status of Iran's nuclear and weapons programs?
Well, the nuclear program definitely took major setbacks during last year's June war. To what degree, we don't really know, but there's open source data that indicates that there's refortification of multiple sites that were hit in that conflict, and then they're refortifying sites like Pickaxe Mountain that weren't hit during the Operation Midnight Hammer. So the idea being that they're protecting against a potential strike, which would indicate that something's going on, some degree of activity or is going on at these sites. There's no indication that there's any enrichment going on. But there is the matter of the whereabouts of the 400 kilograms of enriched uranium up to 60%. This is dangerous, and it makes everybody nervous, I think, because Iran won't tell where it is. They're not telling anybody where it is. It's enriched far beyond any civilian use. And the jump from 60 to 90%, which is what you need for a weapon, it doesn't take very long. While there's no indication that Iran has miniaturized a warhead, there's so much mistrust between the two countries that I think both of them kind of presume the other's worst intention all the time. So this trust deficit plays a big role in how the two look at each other. Regarding missile capacity, Iran has missiles that can hit anywhere in the Middle East accurately, and even into Eastern Europe. They make cheap, accurate missiles at a fairly alarming pace. The best estimates right now are 100 a month. In comparison, the U.S. makes interceptors very slowly, and they're very expensive. So the missile math, if you will, kind of works in Iran's favor, and this is why it's such a crucial point for the U.S. in these negotiations.
I see. And these two countries will hold a technical level meeting next week in Vienna, right? How do you think the negotiations between the U.S. and Iran will play out from here?
Yeah, it's tough to predict because I think so much of the decision making comes down to one man, Donald Trump, and he's difficult to read. So, I think that he wants a more comprehensive deal than and one that's tougher on nuclear than the JCPOA. And he wants that deal to include regional behavior, Iran's relationship with its proxies, and missile agreements. If a deal can be made along those lines, then I think we can avoid conflict. If the Iranians stand their ground where they are right now, I think there's a fairly high potential for kinetic warfare, to be honest. I think what'll be crucial to see is what the actual goals of any kinetic action is, because then that would indicate the scope of the attack and then the scope of the response. So everything indicates that Iran, if there is an attack, Iran plans on expanding this conflict to the greater region, and likely they're going to attack U.S. forces, of which there are 40,000 in the region. So this could come in the way of Iran attacking ships off its coast, trying to flood the zone with massive amounts of ordnance. It could have PMF forces in Iraq attack U.S. forces in the Kurdish region of Iraq, or it could be, striking regional energy infrastructure. So, hopefully a deal can be made, but it looks like both sides are preparing for the worst. Just in the last 48 hours, I think the U.S. embassy in Lebanon made everybody, all non-essential people had to exit, assuming that there would be some attack from Hezbollah, maybe. There's been an F-22 squadron flown in from England that's in Israel right now. The Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain has been whittled down to mission critical status only, so I think it's a couple of dozen people. So, these preparations, they're very similar to what we saw last June. So, again, nothing is inevitable, but it seems like by the hour, it looks more likely that there's going to be some degree of kinetic warfare. We just don't really know what degree that will be. Hopefully something can happen, but right now it's tough to see what that off-ramp would look like.
I see. I guess we'll have to see how the meeting plays out next week. All right, Professor Lawrence, thank you so much for your time and insight today. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Have a good one.